All right, good afternoon. I'll start off with a statement on the launch of a ballistic missile by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The Secretary General condemns the launch of another ballistic missile by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. This action is in violation of Security Council resolutions and a threat to peace and security in the region. The Secretary General calls on the DPRK to ensure full compliance with its international obligations and return to the path of denuclearization. That statement should be online. I also have a personnel appointment. The Secretary General has appointed Ovais Sarmad of India as the Deputy Executive Director of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change at the Assistant Secretary General level. The appointment has been made after consultations with the Conference of Parties through its bureau. Mr. Sarmad will succeed Richard Kinley of Canada, to whom the Secretary General and the Executive Secretary of UNFCCC are grateful for his dedicated service to the UN climate change effort over the last 20 years. Mr. Sarmad currently serves as the Chief of Staff to the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, and more about him on his biography in our office. Meanwhile, the Secretary General, as you know, spent the weekend in Beijing for the Belt and Road Initiative Forum on International Cooperation. In his remarks to the forum, he said that for the first time in human history, the world has at its disposal sufficient resources and advanced technologies to end extreme poverty, to reduce inequalities, and to place the planet on a sustainable trajectory. In order for countries along the Belt and Road to fully benefit from the potential of enhanced connectivity, it is crucial to strengthen the links between the initiative and the Sustainable Development Goals, the Secretary General said. As projects under the initiative unfold, the Secretary General called on all to work together to uphold international environmental and social standards and to ensure that the benefits reach beyond cities into rural areas. With the initiatives expected to generate vast investments in infrastructure, let us seize the moment to help countries make the transition to a clean energy and low-carbon pathways, he added, stressing that Chinese leadership on climate change will continue to be pivotal. The Secretary General added that China's engagement as a central pillar of multilateralism is more necessary than ever today. While in Beijing, he met with several members of the Chinese government, including the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Public Security Minister Guo Shenkeng, and State Councillor Yang Jieqi. He also had a series of bilateral meetings with other leaders in attendance, including Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras of Greece, the Prime Minister Erdogan of Mongolia, and Prime Minister Gentiloni of Italy, as well as the Minister of Industry and Economy of Japan, Toshiro Nikai. He also met with Aung San Suu Kyi, the State Councillor and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Myanmar, and they met, in fact, earlier today. The Secretary General and Aung San Suu Kyi discussed the United Nations support to the democratic transition in Myanmar, the peace process, and the way to a fair solution addressing the root causes of the current crisis in Rakhine State. And this evening, the Deputy Secretary General will leave New York for Ottawa in Canada. She will participate tomorrow in the Global Adolescent Health Conference, as well as have meetings with the Minister of International Development and Francophonie and other senior Canadian officials. She will return to New York later tomorrow. Over the weekend, she spoke at the Doha Forum, reminding participants that the deadline to fulfill the agenda for social development in 2030, adding that in not too much time, but that is not much time, but it is enough if we work hard and we work together, if we work with long-term objectives in mind and we all make sustainable development a priority. She said the implementation of the Paris Agreement on climate change is inextricably linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, the steps we take to mitigate and adapt to climate change will simultaneously advance the 2030 agenda. Her remarks are online. And the Special Envoy for Syria, Stéphane de Mistura, spoke to reporters in Geneva today and said that the meeting that starts in Geneva tomorrow will basically be a preparatory meeting. He added that all the invited delegations will be present. Mr. de Mistura said the intention this time is to go a little bit more deeply and to be more businesslike. He said the meetings will be a little more interactive, proactive, and more frequent. His transcript of his full remarks have just been distributed. And from the Central African Republic, our humanitarian colleagues say that the city of Bangassou has been the scene of indiscriminate violence since May 13th, when an assault was launched by unidentified gunmen on the Tokoyo district, which is mainly inhabited by the Muslim population. Within hours, intense violence forced more than 3,000 people to flee their homes. At present, nearly 1,000 are confined in the mosque compound following threats of an imminent attack, and about 1,500 have sought refuge in the cathedral, while another 500 are in the town's hospital. An unknown number of people have crossed the border into the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 2 humanitarian flights are scheduled to fly to Bangassou tomorrow from Bangui to deliver emergency relief items. The peacekeeping mission has reinforced its presence in the town with peacekeepers and deployment of an attack helicopter as it continues to secure some of the strategic areas of Bangassou. Meanwhile, peacekeepers exchanged fires with anti-Balaka this afternoon, including around the mosque. We will have seen that over the weekend we issued a statement in which we said the Secretary General was outraged by the attacks perpetrated by the suspected anti-Balaka against civilians and the UN mission, both on the 12th and 13th of May in Bangassou. Those attacks led to an undetermined number of civilian casualties and the death of a Moroccan peacekeeper. And on the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the World Health Organization's Regional Director for Africa, Dr. Moeti, visited Kinshasa on Saturday to discuss with national authorities and partners ways to mount a rapid response to the ongoing Ebola outbreak. The visit follows notification by the government of an outbreak in the Likati health zone in the northern part of the country, which borders the CAR. As of Saturday, 11 suspected cases have been reported, including 3 deaths. Dr. Moeti said WHO has already mobilized technical experts to be deployed on the ground and is ready to provide the leadership and technical expertise required to mount a coordinated response. The Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network has been activated to provide additional support if required. Reinforcements of surveillance, contact tracing, case management, and community engagements are also underway. The full extent of the outbreak is not yet clear, but extensive investigation and risk assessments are being conducted. Meanwhile, UNHCR and the World Food Programme today urged donors to step up their help for desperate refugees fleeing South Sudan. Humanitarian agencies are seeking $1.4 billion to provide life-saving aid to South Sudanese refugees living in 6 neighboring countries. That's until the end of 2017. The South Sudanese refugee response plan so far remains only 14% funded. South Sudan has now become the world's fastest growing refugee crisis, with more than 1.8 million refugees, including 1 million children, having sought safety in neighboring countries. The current state of people fleeing South Sudan exceeds the humanitarian community's already pessimistic estimates. For example, the number of people fleeing to Sudan in March surpassed the expected figure for the entire year. And our colleagues in Yemen inform us that an estimated 7.6 million people live in areas at risk of cholera transmission. Inadequate sanitation infrastructure coupled with displacement, overcrowded shelters and settlements increase the risk of person-to-person cholera transmission. In response, the UN is supporting 33 diarrhea treatment centers in Yemen, and 10 oral rehydration therapy centers have also opened. The UN has established 2 emergency centers in Aden and Sana'a with rapid response teams to monitor and treat contaminated water sources. And the UN mission in Afghanistan today is urging parties to take action as the number of child deaths from the conflict has set a new high. The mission recorded 987 child casualties during the first 4 months of this year, 283 deaths and 704 injuries, 20% increase compared to the same period in 2016. More information online. And UNICEF said today that at least 1 in 4 children, or nearly 30 million children, live in poverty in the Middle East and North Africa. According to an analysis covering 11 countries in the region, these children are deprived of 2 or more of the most basic necessities, including basic education, decent housing, and nutritious food. And today is, besides that, it's also the International Day of Families. And this year's observance focuses on the role of families and family-oriented policies in promoting education, overall well-being and of their members. The day also aims to discuss the importance of the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity. And today, our friends at the World Meteorological Organization launched its Year of Polar Prediction campaign, which seeks to improve predictions of weather, climate, and ice conditions in the Arctic and Antarctic. According to WMO, the Arctic and part of the Antarctic are heating up twice as rapidly as the rest of the world, causing melting of glaciers and shrinking sea ice and snow cover. Better forecasts of weather and sea ice conditions will reduce future environmental risks and maximize opportunities associated with rapid climate change in polar regions. They also lead to improved forecasts in lower latitudes where most people live. The campaign will take place from the middle of this year to the middle of 2019 in order to cover an entire year, both in the Arctic and Antarctic. 2:30 p.m. there'll be a briefing here on the second multi-stakeholder forum on science, technology, and innovation for the SDGs. Speakers will include Ambassador Macharia Kamau, Permanent Representative of Kenya, and the co-chair of the STI Forum, along with Dr. Von Turakian of the Science and Technology Advisor for U.S. Secretary of State, and co-chair of the STI, Mary Snap, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Philanthropy, and that's at 2:30 here. 11 o'clock here, there'll be a briefing by senior officials from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs on the world economic situation and prospects mid-2017. We have some advanced material, embargoed material on all the numbers they'll be giving you, which will be available in my office. And this Wednesday, starting at 10 a.m. in ECOSOC, the President of the General Assembly will host a high-level SDG action event on innovation and connectivity. It will feature the Deputy Secretary General, as well, of course, the people from the Office of the PGA, along with number of CEOs and speakers from the world's leading innovation companies, including Google, XPRIZE, and Facebook. And today we say thank you to our friends in Swaziland for paying their dues in full and bringing us up to 98. Who said 98? Mr. Klein, happy Monday. You win.
Well,
Do you have a question? Otherwise, you can yield.
Is there really such a thing as Happy Monday? All right. Anyway.
We're always happy here.
Yeah. Two questions, fairly quick. The first one is, with representatives of the Kurd community invited to the inter-Syrian talks in Geneva, and if not, did they seek an invitation? And secondly, does the Secretary General have any comment on the what appears to be a worldwide hacking that occurred starting Friday, and using malware and so forth, and what the UN can do to assist, if anything, in remedying the situation?
Sure. On your first part, I don't have the exact list of the participants. We can check with Mr. de Misteur's office, but I know Mr. de Misteur has always thought to have the broadest possible representation of at the talks. On the second one, no particular comment. We have not heard of any hits to our own IT systems. Obviously, the issue of cybersecurity is one of growing concern around the world, both as in terms of criminal activity or potential cyber warfare. And I think it's one of these frontier issues which the international community needs to focus on. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. I wonder whether the Secretary General has any confirmation or comment on a report from the United States accusing the Syrian government of killing thousands of prisoners and burning their dead bodies in large crematorium outside Damascus.
I haven't seen that particular report, but I think on a number of occasions, the Secretariat's briefing to the Security Council have focused on the issue of detainees and the lack of information that we have on detainees. Jordan.
Thank you. I have a question on Western Sahara. The latest renewal of the mission. The resolution asked the SG to, within a month, to submit a report about resumption of talks, peace talks. what happened to the efforts of the SG on this regard? Second, what is going on with Mr. Christopher Ross? Is there any replacement?
Sure, I don't. Last update I had is that we had not gotten approval from the formality on a name to replace Mr. Ross. We're still awaiting clearance. Secretary General is determined to relaunch the negotiating process, I think, with a new dynamic and a new spirit, and he will report to the Security Council as requested. Rosalind.
I wanted to go back to the reports of mass killings and then bodies being burned in Syria. Is this the sort of situation that ramps up the Secretary General's concern? Is there something more that he can do, given that the new Geneva process is about to begin, to try to get to some sort of political resolution so that there can be accountability for what does seem to be an egregious crime against humanity?
Well, the Secretary General's team have always been focused on Geneva and the political process. I mean, our position has been clear that the only solution is a political solution. Over these last more than 5 years, 6 years, we have repeatedly received reports of atrocities being committed. The issue of accountability is a critical one. As you know, the General Assembly voted to put forward an accountability mechanism. We're currently recruiting people to staff that mechanism. But I think all these reports of suffering and atrocity should redouble the focus and the effort of those Syrian parties sitting around the table to come to an agreement.
Is there a concern that in light of previous Security Council efforts to try to condemn Syria's behavior during the civil war, that this body might once again be seen as somehow impotent in trying to hold the Syrian government accountable?
I think the body has been voted on by the legislative body in the United Nations, which is the most representative of the organization. Matthew, and then we'll go to the back.
So that report was released by the State Department earlier today.
Thank you. No,
okay. So I wanted to ask you about
not all seeing and all reading.
The Central African Republic. I heard the readout that you gave, and thanks. There are reports that something of a withdrawal of the militiamen from Bangassou has been negotiated by a cardinal. But what I wanted to ask you specifically about is it says that they've agreed to withdraw on the condition that the UN troops stop firing and that the president comes in person to negotiate. And it goes on to say the UN has been accused of taking sides. Is the UN? Are you aware of the UN being one part of an agreement to get this withdrawal? And what do you say to the allegation that the UN has taken sides there, or that its firing may have in fact inflamed things?
No, I don't believe the UN has the UN activities have inflamed. As you know, the UN convoy was attacked. Peacekeepers were killed. There was fighting in the town. Civilians are the first one to have suffered. The United Nations is there in support of the government of the Central African Republic. We have put in a lot of effort to protect civilians, to push back when necessary against various armed groups. There are a number of, we understand, other incidents been reported in locations around Bangassou, which have caused more population movements. The town itself, as far as we know, remains under the control of armed groups and is inaccessible, including the airstrip, and humanitarian access has been severely curtailed. Our focus right now is on getting, as we had said earlier, humanitarian aid in.
But I just want to, because I want to, and maybe you can ask them or something, because it's a BBC report and it says that the UN, that part of the deal to get them to withdraw is for the UN to agree to stop firing. First, generally, would the UN agree to that?
Well, first of all, whatever tactical actions local peacekeeper commanders are taking on the ground, I'm not going to comment on or second guess from here. I think you can ask them if you want. When we get an update from them, we will share it with you. Come on.
Right, thank you. In Côte d'Ivoire, armed groups again are speaking out through the guns. Could you please give us more detail about who they are exactly, what they want? And does this might affect the country seeking for the non-permanent position at the Security Council?
Sorry, say the last part of your question.
This may affect the country seeking for a non-permanent seat at the
That's
Security Council.
the election process through which countries are elected to non-permanent seats is one in which the Secretary General doesn't have a vote. So what impact it will have, I think you need to ask the 192 member states that will be voting. We're obviously extremely concerned at the continuing reports of violence. We understand there are groups of disgruntled soldiers from the armed forces demanding compensation from the government. I think it's clear that violence is not a way to obtain satisfaction of their demands, and we condemn the violence that we have seen. We urge the soldiers to immediately lay down their arms, resume their service, and stop any attacks, especially against civilians. Their constitutional duty is to protect civilians first and foremost. And those responsible for acts of violence against the population should be held accountable in accordance with the law. Marie.
Stéphane, une question en français, si c'est possible.
Oui.
Le docteur Denis Mukwege en RDC conteste la MONUSCO qui assure continuer à assurer sa sécurité. Est-ce que vous avez une clarification sur la position de la MONUSCO? Est-ce que oui ou non l'ONU assure la sécurité du docteur Mukwege?
Nous continuons, d'après les informations qui m'ont été données par la mission, nous continuons à escorter les mouvements en dehors de la clinique et à l'intérieur de la province du Sud Kivu, et notamment pendant ces déplacements vers des pays voisins. Le 1er mai, la mission l'a escorté jusqu'à la frontière du Rwanda. Donc nous continuons à le protéger pendant ces mouvements à l'intérieur de la région et vers des frontières. La protection permanente de l'hôpital du docteur Mukwege est la responsabilité de la police nationale congolaise.
Un follow-up là-dessus, est-ce que c'est pas contestable le fait que ce soit la police nationale congolaise qui assure sa sécurité dans l'enceinte de l'hôpital, étant donné ses relations conflictuelles avec les autorités?
La situation, nous sommes bien au courant de la situation. La MONUSCO a un mandat de protection des civils. Elle exerce ce mandat le mieux possible dans la limite de ses moyens. Mr. Barada, and then your neighbor. Yeah,
Thank you, Stéphane. On Syria, the escalation zones, the UN offered support for the idea and even to provide some expertise. How is there any contacts between the UN and the guarantors and other parties on this regard? And the other question I have, there was a signing of an agreement between Qatar and the UN. I think they're going to provide $40 million to OCHA. How these money are going to be spent?
My understanding is that the money given by Qatar to OCHA is, as you say, $40 million over a period of 4 years, and that money will be used for OCHA's coordination efforts. On your first question, I would ask you to ask the Syria team. I think as the talks get underway, I don't want to get into any of the details of the negotiations in Syria from here. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Stéphane. I have a question on Bangladesh. From the very beginning, UN is urging for a free, fair, and credible election in Bangladesh, and the then Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, tried a lot, assigned Assistant Secretary General Oscar Fernandez Taranduko for the credible and inclusive election. So what is the current Secretary General position as next election is approaching to hold a free, fair, and inclusive election in Bangladesh? What will be the UN role?
I don't have anything specific for you on Bangladesh, but obviously the principal position of the UN remains that we always call for free, fair, and credible elections. It's Jordan.
I have a question about the U.S. President trip to Middle East. He's meeting the Palestinian and Israeli leaders. Does the UN attach any importance on this meeting to solve the Palestinian issue? Also, I have another question. He's going first to Saudi Arabia, and then the Saudis are inviting many leaders from the Arab and Islamic world. Is the UN invited, or anybody will be represented in that
I'm not
meeting?
aware.
And are you, like, can the UN reach out to the Saudis to attend, because it's going to attend by many leaders?
This is a meeting, from what I understand, organized by the United States and Saudi Arabia. I'm not aware that we're invited, and it's their meeting to have. We of course attach importance to any meeting of a U.S. president with Palestinian and Israeli leaders. I think it is clear to everybody the critical role the United States has in the Middle East peace process, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Mr. Lee.
Ask you about these reports. Now that I think I'd asked you before. Now that the Ugandans and I guess the U.S. have wound down their search for Joseph Kony. One, is it formalized that the UN is not going it alone? And two, do you have any response to reports of a trail of sexual abuse caused by particularly the Ugandans searching Joseph Kony? There's reports citing UN reports of 30 victims of abuse and somehow 44 women and girls impregnated by the peacekeepers. What's the UN going to do on those charges?
Obviously the article is raises a lot of concerns. We'll take a look and try to track down which UN reports there.
This thing was also reported a couple of months ago. Yeah. I think it was asked about in here. Okay, I wanted to ask in Yemen, now that the government or the authorities in charge of Sana'a have declared an emergency, and they say there's 115 deaths by cholera. What is the UN's role in helping respond to it? And have you yet gotten anything back on the reports of expired medicines delivered by WHO?
No, not on the medicines. I mean, as I think I said just a few minutes ago, the UN's role is through WHO's to support the government of Yemen through the establishment of rehydration centers, diarrhea centers, helping with medicines in every way we can.
But I guess that's one of the reasons I'm asking. It's been about almost 10 days. Do they have no response on the on?
Oh, sorry, I was answering to you on
okay,
the
I understand.
cholera.
I'll check the two in the sense
I will.
If you're saying count on WHO,
no, I think that whatever that was an isolated incident. I don't think it impacts WHO's work. And in fact, Jordan, I stand corrected, and thank God people in my office are paying attention to what I say. Irina Bokova will be representing the UN in Riyadh. There you go.
Yes, of course.
You see, I'm. Whatever. I'm not going to say what I think. Go ahead.
Thank you, Stéphane. On Friday, I asked you about update of any humanitarian implication of the Raqqa operation in Syria. Did you get any information about that?
No, nothing today. Yes, sir.
This is the last question for today. So, on Yemen, Mr. Wuld Sheikh was hoping that to convene a new talks between the parties before Ramadan, which started actually in 10 days. Any update? And the second question, also he said he will invite the Houthis to come to Amman, Jordan, to discuss some issues. Is there any update on both?
Nothing that much to say except that Mr. Ismail continues his consultations with the various parties, a new tour he started last week. Again, with all these kinds of negotiations, I think when he's ready to emerge and say that there's a date and a process, he will, but we have to give him the time to do his work. Mr. Lee.
Sure, thanks a lot. Since in hearing UNESCO, I've been meaning to ask you this. There's a controversy in Cameroon where a test is being administered today in the areas that didn't have internet for 94 days and the schools were closed. And a lot of people are saying the test, it's basically to destroy the Anglophone education system. People are taking a test at gunpoint. And many people there said UNESCO said nothing. I don't know whose role it is. Is it Lon Senifal? Is there anyone in the UN system that's looking at what's taking place there?
I'll take a look at that report.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.